Let's rant and rave a little bit. And the first thing we were ranting and raving about is oppressive small business regulation. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart as someone who's owned many businesses and has been tasked with doing all the regulation. You probably don't realize how I labor behind the scenes, keeping us in compliance with things like taxes and trust requirements and insurance and all kinds of things the government oppresses me with, right?
Mm.
All right, so most of the LLCs we form are for small business owners, and we can't figure out, and this is when I say we, as far as I know, all the attorneys out there representing small businesses, we are incredibly uncertain as to when that small business owner is going to need a securities filing. Nobody knows the answer to this as far as I can tell. For example, if you're going to raise a bunch of money in the public and you're advertising and you're going to say, hey, to random people, give me $100,000, give me $10,000, whatever, that almost certainly requires some type of filing. Now, the other end of that spectrum is you and your wife or a close friend start an LLC to buy a real estate property and it's all your money. Certainly, you don't need a filing for that.
No.
But then you have everything in between. Right? What if you ask for your brother-in-law for some money? Or what if like one of your friends, and does that require a filing? And we've never been able to figure this out as best I can tell. And I've asked numerous securities lawyers. I've got another friend of mine and he went to Harvard and he's a securities lawyer. And I sat him down and I'm like, hey, can you tell me when a small business needs to do a securities file when they're forming an LLC? And he probably talked himself into circles for 5 minutes. And by the time he was done, he forgot the question he was answering. So I got so frustrated with it one day. And I said, I'm going to call up the Texas Securities Board. And I waited on hold for about an hour with the Texas Securities Board. And finally, I got an attorney for the Texas Securities Board. I said, hey, I'm a small business law firm. We represent a lot of small businesses across the state of Texas. And I've asked several securities lawyers, and we all can't figure out, can you give us some guidance on when small businesses forming LLCs need to do some sort of securities file? And she talked a little bit and then she started to whisper and she said, Mr. Silverman, I'm going to tell you a secret. And I said, okay, finally, this woman at the Texas Securities Board is going to impart this amazing wisdom. And she says, Mr. Silverman, here's the secret. They're all doing it wrong, but we just don't enforce it until they do something really bad. And then we just tack it on for fun. Okay, that's awesome. So what you're telling me is every time my clients form an LLC, or most of the time, it requires some sort of filing, but nobody ever does it. But if any of them go to steal and cheat a bunch of people, then you just take on the penalty for good measure. So
That's at least good to hear that clarity from someone in government. So
I'll tell you how we handle it at our firm anyway. We're not securities lawyers. I have to tell you to go get a securities lawyer. Nobody ever does, but I have to tell you to go get one and check to whether you need a filing. And they're like, how much is a securities lawyer? They're like $2,500 an hour or something.
Yeah.
And they're all like, no, thank you. I think we've got a war story. So you only hurt yourself when you lie to your lawyer. We get a lot of potential clients and they're making their case sound better than it actually is. I'm not going to say they lie. They maybe just omit some material facts. And I always tell them, tell me the worst things first. Don't trick me into taking your case, because ultimately you're paying my hourly rate. You're doing yourself a disservice if we don't have all the bad facts. So we were trying this case, a temporary injunction hearing, and we put Mr. Smith on the stand, thought we'd done this wonderful job on direct. And then first words out of opposing counsel's mouth is, Mr. Smith, isn't it true that you're a convicted felon? And Mr. Smith is, I'm uncertain whether I'm a convicted felon. And opposing counsel says, now that's a new one. What do you mean you're uncertain? So we take Mr. Smith back and we're like, Mr. Smith, are you a convicted felon? And we say, look, we're going to make this real easy. Can you own a gun? Can you vote? I think Mr. Smith became sure that he was a convicted felon when we like, don't lie to your lawyer, because we could have handled the were you a convicted felon question a little bit better if we had a heads up. All right. And our final example of government oppression is, and you may not know this, but this is one of the things I supervise at our firm, is we are in 1099 season. And 1099s are informational returns that small businesses have to file, typically hundreds of these forms every year. If you're a small business and you pay vendors throughout the year, you have to, if you pay them over $600, you have to report how much you've paid them, and you fill out a form, you give it to the vendor, you give it to the IRS. And that is the primary way that the IRS catches the small business owners underreporting or not reporting income. The whole system, as a matter of fact, is based on small businesses snitching on each other. That's the whole system. And what happens is if that guy doesn't put it on his income tax return and you file it, then the software is gonna match it together, and that's how it's gonna trigger an audit for that person. So the whole system is snitching. Now, in the old days, we would generally try to comply. But do you know how much the penalty was in the old days? It was $15.
Yeah.
Today, that penalty is $630. And oh, by the way, that's not actually the maximum penalty. There's no maximum penalties.
Yeah.
That's not the worst of it. In order to file these returns, you have to use this system called FIRE. And here's my favorite part of the whole 1099 process is once you have all these businesses and once you get to the end and you send it to all your vendors, hundreds of forms, and maybe hopefully you got all of them, maybe you didn't. You get to the very end and you're filing your tax return. And if you have an S corp, it's an 1120S. If you have a C corp, it's 1120 or whatever it is. And the IRS, and by the way, they're sneaky snakes is what they are. Okay. The IRS updated the return, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And they put this one little line in there and they say, has the corporation or will the corporation file all 1099s required? And they ask you as the president or the vice president or the CFO, whoever signed this return, it wasn't enough to fine us $1 gazillion. They want us to sign a statement in this return under felony penalties of perjury that we filed every 1099 so they can send us to prison if we don't. That's the type of tax burden that our government wants to put on us.
Sounds about right.
And that's what that's what we're doing. That's what all small businesses are doing this time of year. That is our tax system at work. And by the way, here's a quick tax tip. If you want to avoid doing a bunch of 1099s, only pay your vendors with credit cards, because if you pay your vendors with credit cards, then the credit card company takes care of filing the 1099 and then you don't have to. So that's a little tax tip.
It's a good workaround. Yeah.